off the press, SpaceX is fighting back, threatening to sue the FAA after the feds proposed fining SpaceX $633,000. This also comes as Starship Flight 5 is on hold due to the FAA saying that they need more time to review before they can issue a modified launch license to catch the booster. It's been an interesting past couple of days with the FAA emailing me directly twice. And this fine of $633,000 is really not going to hurt SpaceX, but I believe it's a symbolic fine. I posted on my X page that this fine is nothing for SpaceX financially, but the actions by the FAA make a statement. Delaying SpaceX, which is at the forefront of the space industry, is delaying humanity's progress. The idea that SpaceX is moving faster than the FAA can is an FAA problem, and I think SpaceX agrees with this. They need to get their ish together. They need to hire more employees. They need to be more efficient. This is ridiculous. Elon again shared yesterday that Flight 5 is built and ready to fly. Flight 6 will be ready before Flight 5 even gets approved by the FAA. So talk about holding us back. Here's some other posts that Elon responded to this week. Mario Nawfal says, let me get this straight. The FAA has to go back a year and fine SpaceX for stupid violations. Is the FAA fining Boeing for sending up a spacecraft that left 2 American astronauts at the ISS because it wasn't safe enough to take them home? Elon said, amazingly, no Starliner fines for Boeing. The FAA Space Division is harassing SpaceX about nonsense that doesn't affect safety while giving a free pass to Boeing, even after NASA concluded that their spacecraft was not safe enough to bring back the astronauts. There needs to be resignations from the FAA leadership. Elon again says the fundamental problem is that humanity will forever be confined to Earth unless there is radical reform at the FAA. A Texas congressman, Keith Self, sent a letter strongly encouraging the FAA to accelerate its unnecessary prolonged review of SpaceX's Starship proposed launch program. Quote, our national security cannot afford to let incorrect information delay American innovation, and I strongly encourage your agency to quickly approve SpaceX's proposal to increase their launch cadence at Starbase from 5 to 25 launches a year. Elon said, much appreciated. And again, SpaceX has been calling this out for a couple of years now.
That would be the next flight of Starship, which, Starship is, the next flight of Starship is ready to fly. We are waiting for regulatory approval. It really should not be possible to build a giant rocket faster than the paper can move from one desk to another.
But SpaceX just posting this morning, Thursday, September 19th, for nearly 2 years, SpaceX has voiced its concerns with the FAA's inability to keep pace with the commercial spaceflight industry. It's clear that the agency lacks the resources to timely review licensing materials, but also focuses its limited resources on areas unrelated to public safety. These distractions continue to directly threaten national priorities and undercut American industry's ability to innovate. Now, SpaceX has also attached a letter, and let's read what it says. By the way, this letter is addressed to the Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation in Washington, D.C. It says, Dear Chairs Cantwell and Lucas and Ranking Members Cruz and Lofgren, for nearly 2 years, SpaceX and many in industry, legal practice, and academia have raised the alarm on the Federal Aviation Administration's implementation of its commercial space launch and re-entry regulatory mandate, which is administered by the Office of Commercial Space Transportation, or AST. It has been clear for some time that AST lacks the resources to timely review licensing materials, mistakenly focuses its limited resources on areas unrelated to its public safety regulatory scope, and has been unsuccessful in modernizing and streamlining its regulations. Most recently, the FAA alleged that SpaceX violated its regulations and proposed a $633,009 penalty for these alleged violations. It is notable that these violations and penalties were announced shortly after increased scrutiny on AST by Congress for its failure to reasonably and timely execute its regulatory obligations. It is also notable that in announcing these penalties, FAA's politically appointed chief counsel was quoted in the FAA's announcement on the matter. It is SpaceX's understanding that it is highly irregular and perhaps unprecedented for a chief counsel to be quoted on an enforcement matter. SpaceX forcefully rejects the FAA's assertion that it violated any regulations. And this part is in bold. SpaceX is absolutely committed to safety in all operations. With respect to these matters, it is notable that in each instance, SpaceX provided AST with sufficient notice of these relatively minor license updates, which had no bearing on public safety. The fact that AST was unable to timely process these minor updates underscores systematic challenges at AST. The FAA alleges 3 distinct violations. 1. That SpaceX used a propellant farm at SpaceX's launch site that the FAA had not yet approved. 2. That SpaceX used an updated communications plan that the FAA had not yet approved. And 3. That SpaceX did not conduct a launch poll 2 hours prior to a launch. As it relates to the RP-1 fuel farm, use of the RP-1 fuel farm had been approved by our U.S. Government Range Safety Authority for an upcoming national security space launch program mission. The system has been safely used repeatedly ever since because there is no public safety risk. Despite the federal range's approval, AST elected to involve itself and now proposes penalties against SpaceX because AST was unable to do its job in an efficient manner. The communication plan changes are entirely unrelated to public safety, and AST has no regulatory authority to require a T-2 hour poll. SpaceX responds in detail to each allegation below for your information and to clarify for the record. Oh my gosh, you guys. This is sounding like AST is getting involved in things that really aren't in their scope. So here SpaceX breaks it down. FAA enforcement action, quick facts. Communications plan. A. FAA alleges that SpaceX operated under an unapproved communications plan for the PSN MSF launch in June 2023. SpaceX denies this allegation. B. SpaceX's only change to the communications plan was to change the location of the Launch Control Center from one location on Kennedy Space Center to another. No communications procedures, networks, or personnel changed. C. On May 2nd, 2023, SpaceX sent the FAA a revised SpaceX Falcon and Dragon communications plan for incorporation into its launch licenses. D. Each week after SpaceX submitted Plan V5.4 during weekly licensing calls between the FAA and SpaceX, SpaceX told the FAA that it required the plan by June 1st and asked whether the FAA had feedback. E. During a call on June 13th, SpaceX again asked FAA if it had feedback because SpaceX had a launch on June 18th that would use the new location of the Launch Control Center. In response, and for the first time, the FAA told SpaceX that there were, quote, too many revisions on Plan V5.4 for it to be able to provide feedback on it by June 18th. What the heck? F. As such, on June 15th, SpaceX submitted a new version of a revised communications plan that solely updated the location of the Launch Control Center. This change to the communications plan that SpaceX operated under was clearly a continuing accuracy update and therefore, per the regulations, did not require FAA approval. G. On June 16th, the FAA finally began its review of Plan V5.3.1, and minutes later, SpaceX responded to the FAA's questions and offered a call to discuss any further questions. The FAA responded, stating it would not be able to complete its review of Plan V5.3.1 before the June 18th launch. And in bold, the FAA stated that SpaceX had not provided it with enough notice, even though SpaceX had told the FAA 6 weeks earlier that it required use of the plan by June 1st, and the date was now June 16th. Again, approval was not required under the regulation for this continuing accuracy update. H. On June 22, 2023, the FAA sent SpaceX minor comments on Plan V5.4, and this same day, SpaceX sent responses to the FAA. hours after SpaceX responded, on June 22, 2023, the FAA approved Plan V5.4 for incorporation into 2 of SpaceX launch licenses, but not in SpaceX's launch license for LC-39A. Oh my gosh. They got the receipts and everything. Folks, we're not done. Buckle up. On August 20th, 2023, the FAA later approved Plan V5.4 for incorporation into the LC-39A license, which was 110 days after SpaceX originally submitted the plan. During these 110 days, the FAA did not ask SpaceX for any additional information on Plan V5.4. The plan was not further modified, and therefore the plan was the same as the one approved on June 22nd, 2023. It's unclear why it took the FAA an additional 59 days and 110 days total to, quote, review and approve, but the fact that the communications plan was approved demonstrates there was no public safety concern with moving the Launch Control Center. Point number 2, T-2 hour polling. The FAA alleges that SpaceX should have conducted a T-2 hour readiness poll prior to the PSN MSF launch per its communications plan, and that such a readiness poll should have been in SpaceX's launch procedures. There is no requirement in the regulations for a T-2 hour readiness poll. So why are they requiring this? B, importantly, SpaceX conducts a poll prior to propellant loading later in the count, consistent with safe operations. Okay, now we're going to talk about 3, Rocket Propellant 1, RP-1 farm. The FAA alleges that SpaceX operated an unapproved RP-1 farm during the EchoStar 23 launch. Specifically, the RP-1 farm used during the EchoStar 23 was moved to enhance the public safety of SpaceX's operations. Specifically, the new RP-1 farm location and design increased safety to individuals both inside and outside the LC-39A fence through multiple improvements. The RP-1 farm moved to a location that is more than twice the distance from the nearest publicly accessible area outside the fence line, with an increase of 700 feet to 1,600 feet. B, SpaceX eliminated a hazard both inside and outside the fence line by moving the RP-1 storage tanks away from a heat source that was near the old location. The old RP-1 storage tanks required additional hazard mitigation due to their spacing, and these mitigations were eliminated with the new location. The new RP-1 storage tanks are farther apart, and the additional hazards associated with the previous spacing have been eliminated. C, prior to the launch, the Federal Range Safety Authorities reviewed and approved the new RP-1 farm's use. D, on August 20th, less than a month after the FAA issued a SpaceX license for the EchoStar Jupiter 3 launch, the FAA approved a waiver for the Crew 7 launch that allowed SpaceX to conduct the launch from LC-39A with the new RP-1 farm. E, the waiver that the FAA issued stated that granting the waiver would not jeopardize public health and safety, the safety of property, or any national security or foreign policy interest of the United States. F, since SpaceX's operations for EchoStar, Jupiter 3 launch, and the Crew 7 launch were the same as related to the new RP-1 farm, it's not clear why the FAA made a positive safety determination for the Crew 7 launch, but could not do the same for the EchoStar Jupiter 3 launch. Oh my goodness, I think they make some good points here, but we're not done. G, instead, it took the FAA several months after the Crew 7 waiver to approve the RP-1 farm license modification, showing inefficiency and lack of public safety focus by AST. H, the FAA has never asserted that the new ground safety configuration at LC-39A or related ground safety analysis was not safe or did not comply with the regulations. Rather, when the FAA issued SpaceX a license for the EchoStar Jupiter 3 launch on July 26, 2023, the transmittal letter for the license said only that, quote, the FAA cannot issue a positive safety review determination for the modification request submitted on July 19, 2023, ahead of the EchoStar Jupiter 3 mission. I, FAA is on console prior to launch operations. It did not stop launch operations because of this matter, indicating no public hazard or public safety risk. And J, finally, FAA intervened via letter that was delivered to SpaceX well into SpaceX's countdown procedures for the launch. The SpaceX flight reliability team called the FAA to communicate that as an operator, SpaceX believed it was unsafe for the FAA to be sending these types of communications during operations and altering propellant operations for non-contingency scenarios on the fly. The FAA leadership on the call agreed with this assessment and did not direct SpaceX to stand down or pull its license. Again, SpaceX is absolutely committed to safety in all operations. For well over a year now, SpaceX has voiced the concerns with the FAA's inability to keep pace with the commercial space industry and the needs of the U.S. government agencies that rely on commercial space launch capability for national security and national priorities. Respectfully, David Harris, VP Legal. Oh my gosh, well, I need some water after reading all of that. Would you guys believe that that was literally my first take? I actually hadn't read through the whole letter, but my TV news experience helped me get through that. But regardless, I mean, this is absurd. I saw that Marcus House shared this 3 hours ago, talking about some of the examples here do seem kind of crazy. By any measure, there must be a better way. These FAA distractions directly threaten national priorities and undercut American industry's ability to innovate. I think it's interesting that just a couple days ago, the FAA emailed me directly to give me a heads up about this fine, and now SpaceX is hitting back, laying out another very articulate and thorough argument for why this is just ridiculous. So will this multi-page letter to Congress do anything? I guess we will have to see what happens moving forward. Well, I just wanted to get this information out there as quickly as possible. A lot is going on right now between SpaceX and the FAA, and I'm really glad that SpaceX is standing up for themselves and also trying to make change, because we need change in order to achieve the crazy goals that SpaceX has, and it's really a shame to be held back by things that seem completely ridiculous, quite frankly. So I will keep you up to date on this information, but thanks for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video.